Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the launch of NISCA's webinar series on strategy and effective practices for cultural institutions in response to COVID-19 and these unimaginable times that we're living through. I'm Mara Manis, Executive Director of NISCA. Despite the unprecedented challenges that we now face, through creativity and ingenuity many of you have demonstrated as you redirect and refocus your work is a testament to the collective future of the arts in our state. We know that the arts are a critical driver of people and places. Our sector constitutes 8% of the state's economy, contributes $120 billion annually, and accounts for almost 500,000 jobs. It is clear that our sector will also play a vital role in fostering our state's recovery. NISCA is dedicated to supporting you in every way we can, not only through our grants, but also by providing guidance and resources as we navigate these times together. As part of this effort, we will offer bi-weekly webinars featuring leading industry professionals. Our next webinar will be held on May 22nd and cover digital marketing strategies and practices. Future webinar topics include earned income models and nonprofit legal and financial planning. Information regarding these webinars will be sent to you, and we invite your feedback and ideas on future webinar topics. Additionally, to support your increased online visibility, NISCA has introduced an NYS Arts Online tab on our homepage. This offers visitors access to our grantees' digital initiatives. Please keep sending your updates to our public affairs email and to be included on our site. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Yasmin Falk, a founder and partner at Advance NYC. Advance works with nonprofits in the arts field, including Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, Saratoga Performing Arts Center, the Weeksville Heritage Center, and Prospect Park Alliance, among some of their clients. Their team of experts has helped advance the work of dozens of mission-based organizations through a combination of big picture planning and support of on-the-ground execution. Today, Yasmin will be discussing some of the fundraising myths she and her team have tackled over the last 2 months, and will be sharing strategies on how to position your organization in this ever-changing landscape. I welcome Yasmin Falk. Thank you for being with us today, Yasmin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mara. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to begin by thanking you and the entire team at the New York State Council on the Arts for putting this webinar series together and for inviting us to join you today. It's also a pleasure to virtually connect with so many of our colleagues from across the state. Thank you for joining us. I saw some familiar names on the list and many, many unfamiliar ones. But regardless, I look forward to crossing paths with all of you in the future and hopefully at a moment when we can see each other in person and not just digitally. Through our work at Advance, we have had the opportunity to connect with and hear from nearly 150 organizations since this crisis began. And while the title of today's webinar is just a little tongue-in-cheek, what we realized through these many conversations is that the same questions emerged time and again, and that organizations of all sizes and disciplines were grappling with a few central challenges in this moment. So when we began to think about a topic for today's conversation, we felt that this forum presented a good opportunity to address these concerns more broadly, dispel some of the key misconceptions, explore the ways that best practices still firmly apply, even in a crisis, and share some examples of what we've seen on the ground. We're going to bring up on the screen right now the 5 myths that we'll be discussing today. As we work through them, we'll leave the time at the end of every myth to answer some questions. We welcome your input. Any questions or relevant examples can be shared with our team throughout the presentation using the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. When you submit a question, please do include your name and the name of your organization so that we can share it. We're going to do our best to get to as many of those as we can as we work our way through the discussion today. So with that, I would love to dive right in with debunking the top 5 fundraising myths in the time of COVID-19. Myth 1, which is absolutely pervasive, is that it's not the right time to ask for support. Variations on this myth also include that the idea that you cannot ask for support right now if you're an arts and cultural organization, and if you don't provide direct services like healthcare or housing or food, etc. Before we fully dive into this myth, I'd like to start out by underscoring something that Mara said as she introduced us today, that the arts and culture are absolutely absolutely essential. They're essential as an economic engine for the state, as an employer of 500,000 New Yorkers, and as a crucial resource for the communities that we serve. And when we buy into this myth, we're perpetuating a false dichotomy between the arts and culture and critical social service organizations, when in fact we're partners in serving our communities together. I would agree that in the first few weeks of the crisis, it wasn't the right time to ask for a donation, but maybe not for the reason that you would imagine. We've learned through past crises that donors will continue to give in good times and in bad. But in moments of extreme flux, while they were setting up their homeschools, figuring out where to isolate, and like all of us, ensure what their lives were going to look like or how they were going to operate, your donors would not have had the capacity to make philanthropic decisions. That time, however, we feel has passed. All of us have settled into some version of a routine, and we have seen that donors have begun giving generously to the organizations that they're engaged with. In many instances, when we talk to organizations, we've heard that this myth is perpetuated by board members. And I imagine that this is partially driven by a fear of fundraising. And so what we've been working to emphasize to these partner organizations and to their boards is that core stakeholders, and these could be individuals, institutional funders, government funders, prospects with whom you've begun to form substantial relationships, they want to connect right now, just like the rest of us. As the term stakeholder implies, they have a vested interest in your organization, and they want to understand how you are being affected, how you're addressing the needs of your community during this crisis, and how they can continue to be involved. Now is not the moment for organizations to go silent. The starting point for all of these communications should be, as always, mutual discovery and education. You as an organization sharing what you've been experiencing, how you're responding, and how you're thinking about the future. As always, best practice applies. You want to enter these conversations with empathy and curiosity. How is the donor or funder doing? What are they experiencing? How are they thinking about the future? Of course, the discussion is going to evolve in real time. If the donor reveals a difficult personal circumstance, it's an opportunity to respond with care and empathy and an offer of whatever support you can provide. But I would encourage you not to bring any preconceived notions about the donor's financial situation to the conversation. Many people are weathering this storm just fine, and they still want to support the organizations that they care deeply about. If it becomes clear during the conversation that it's not the right time for an ask, remember that there are still considerable benefits to reaching out right now. You may be able to take an important step in growing that relationship. You may learn more about the donor's situation and discern when or if there's an appropriate moment to solicit down the line. And you get to provide the type of personal touch that is really at the heart of cultivation and stewardship. Even small organizations with limited capacity are able to reach out and cut through the noise right now from what we've seen. For example, Jack Arts in Brooklyn was able to raise nearly 50% of their budgeted individual giving line in just 3 days of outreach. Instead of feeling pressure to generate a big Kickstarter campaign, which I believe is what they've done in the past, that requires massive build out and fulfillment or sending giant e-blasts, what they did is they identified their historic donors and communicated directly, personally, and very simply about their needs at the moment. Donors responded positively with gifts of all sizes, in part because the ask was genuine, and also because Jack has been very responsive to this moment, leaning into their role in the community and offering their venue to be a distribution center for a mutual aid group serving low-income Brooklyn families. When we're planning these communications, we want to be really strategic about how we reach out, especially if your internal capacity is stretched right now, as I know everyone's is. If you've done several e-blasts already, what can you do to cut through the noise and really reach donors? Can you send out more personal emails to a few key supporters? Can you make phone calls if you have telephone numbers? Now is also a great time to invest in simple email merge tools that allow you to generate personal emails at scale, a tool that Jack leveraged very successfully, as have a number of our smaller partners. Make a note also right now of what contact info you wish you had, so you can make a plan for how to gather it more effectively moving forward. Consider, sorry, yes, please.
I do have that question about the personal touch. I'm receiving, as I'm sure many, a lot of emails with a donate now button. How effective are those?
Those are effective. As always, you want to make sure when you're reaching donors that you're reaching them through multiple channels. So an email with a donate button is effective as one step in a multi-part outreach. So you want to reach donors via phone, via direct mail, and some of the organizations we partner with, since they don't have access to their office, are writing personal notes and sending them to donors right now. And email is still a critical form of outreach. And so we have seen those types of communications be very successful in partnership with other methods.
Great, thank you.
Of course. I also would encourage everyone to consider the ways in which an organization, Jack is a great example, is partnering with direct service organizations if you feel that that falls within your mission to both serve the community and reinforce shared values. If it's appropriate for your organization, we know a lot of institutions are opening their spaces as distribution centers or are engaging more deeply with their communities and some of the social service partners. For example, WP Theater is dedicating 25% of the revenue from their appeal to Sanctuary for Families, an organization that serves survivors of gender violence. It's a good moment to be really thoughtful and creative about how your mission is activated in your community. Finally, please keep in mind that donors are able to balance multiple giving priorities at once. We really see the choice between direct services and the arts and culture as a false one. A donor has the ability to care deeply about both and support both. Individuals understand how cultural organizations are hurting right now, how important these organizations are to the community and to recovery efforts in the future, and they recognize the urgency to give to all of their chosen causes. I'm going to pause here for a moment and take any questions from the group. I see here that Ava Brune has asked that a question about foundations. So many foundations do not have email addresses for us to keep in touch remotely, and we are not able to get into our offices to generate print versions of correspondence and grant requests. What do you recommend to tackle this challenge? That's a really interesting question. I do think that, I know that some foundations have made their contact info a little bit more available. Oh, hi, Wendy. Some of the foundations have made their contact info a little bit more available. I know that some of the organizations that we work with have also maybe made one trip into their office to print out contact info. And as I mentioned, the sort of personal notes that they've written, those personal handwritten notes have gone to both major donors and to funders. And I also think that foundations right now would be very, very responsive to sharing contact info if you request it through their info, sort of like the info at, and that's what I would recommend. I also think that in certain instances, you can find contact info if you go through something like a foundation center. But Advance can do a little bit more research on the back end and share with this group any further thoughts after this conversation.
Great.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And then Nancy Reynolds follows up, if we are missing personal phone numbers, what is the next most effective form of outreach? That's also an excellent question. I think the next most effective form of outreach is going to be an email that looks very, very personal, maybe paired with a personal note. I think that a lot of the organizations that we're in conversation with right now have realized how many phone numbers they are missing, and they're putting together initiatives to gather more phone numbers. In fact, I believe that Progone's PRTT is undertaking a campaign specifically to gather phone numbers from their supporters, because they realized in this moment that they don't have as many forms of communication as they really need to stay in close touch. Excellent. So myth number 2, pardon me while I get my notes. Myth number 2, we're going to bring it up on screen. There isn't much we can do right now to fundraise. So we should pause work, furlough staff, or otherwise cut costs to preserve resources and manage organizational finances. We do know the intense financial strain that arts and cultural organizations are under right now, and the feeling that particularly if there's no programming to push, fundraising and perhaps marketing and communications staff and resources are not the best use of limited funds. We also know, we understand that there are smaller organizations where the executive director or the program director may serve in the function of chief fundraiser, and then at this moment, there are more demands on their time than ever before. In this situation, it might be tempting to back burner development efforts. However, we encourage all organizations to continue to work now with an eye towards long-term goals. For many organizations, earned income is at a standstill or is going to be significantly reduced in the year to come. And this is the moment to focus on contributed revenue, building out your contributed revenue. More specifically, with everyone at home, there's a lot of opportunity to focus on the kind of personalized relationship building we discussed in Myth 1, which can lead to considerable financial dividends down the line. It's this long-term growth that we're encouraging organizations to look at rather than the short-term urgency to cut costs. We are, however, also encouraging organizations to streamline their approach to fundraising or to think creatively about execution. Are there updates that you can make to your CRM that will allow for more automation? If designing a newsletter, I was talking to one organization yesterday, they said designing a newsletter and putting it together felt really overwhelming at the moment. Can you replace that with a mail merged HTML email that updates your base but feels a little bit more personal than that designed email? Do you have staff that are idle right now that can be deployed in different ways? I know that some organizations have sort of forward-facing staff that have been brought back with the PPP loan, but if the organization isn't open, they have time on their hands. Can you ask board members or close donors to provide more volunteer hours in support of your efforts? We've had conversations with at least 2 partner organizations, Weeksville Heritage Center and Progones, as I mentioned, that are considering outbound call campaigns at this moment. And it's a first for both of them. At these organizations, they're looking at how they can utilize their staff and artists in a new way to engage donors. Finally, we would encourage you to take this moment to assess whether your systems are fully supporting your development activities in a way that maximizes time and energy. This assessment might lead to the conclusion that now is the moment to invest in some fundraising resources and systems that can make it easier, faster, more strategic, and ultimately cheaper to fundraise in the long run. I'm going to pause here again and take a look at the questions that we have coming into the Q&A box. Fantastic. Darren Woods, we are going to start calling board members to talk about their giving this year and if they can give at the level they gave last year. Would you recommend a cold call or should we email them to give them a heads up? Fantastic question, because we have done a lot of this as well with our partner organizations. You should absolutely email them to give them a heads up. I think that in an ideal world, that email to alert them that you're going to call and talk to them about their giving would come from a peer. So that would be perhaps the board chair would be a good individual to send that out. But I think that those conversations can be so much more effective if the donor is prepared and they know that they are going to be asked. They can take a look in advance at their philanthropic commitments and feel ready for the conversation. So absolutely, Darren, please do send them an email with a heads up. Next question from Patricia Cruz. How should we schedule the frequency of our asks? For example, we are doing a gala, did Giving Tuesdays, and are considering a year-end appeal all within 2 months. Patricia, I'm actually going to put a pin in that question for just a moment. We're going to circle back to it in relation to our next myth, because that is very, very relevant. The answer in short, and we'll look at it in detail, is that you want to build a sort of total campaign for the organization so that all of those various asks can feel related to a single purpose. And we'll get into that in just a moment.
And Yasmin,
yes,
I was thinking about who's carrying that message on behalf of the organization. And I had received a call a couple of days ago from, I believe it was actually a fight choreographer who'd worked with a certain theater, and they were calling for to solicit donation because they knew that I was a supporter. And I was really moved by the fact that this was a person, to me, it exemplified, just the broad range of those who could carry the message on behalf of the organization. Absolutely. And he called in the middle of the day, so I couldn't take that call, for a long time. But I also did want to connect with him. I was very moved that he reached out. And also I felt that after hours, after my working hours, I would be more than happy to have those conversations, because right now is a time that I think people are looking for that.
No, absolutely.
Welcome that, maybe.
No, absolutely. And I think that that's exactly what we're seeing at organizations, that they're looking to utilize their artists or their staff or the community members that they serve or their board members in different ways to engage donors, because I don't think there's anything more effective than an artist or a fight choreographer calling on behalf of an organization and saying, I care deeply about this organization, here's why, here's what they're going through, would you consider supporting? I think that is really meaningful. Myth 3 is about virtual fundraisers. I know that many of you have had fundraising events that were canceled. So did many of our partner organizations. And in a lot of conversations, we've heard the idea that virtual fundraisers won't be as financially successful as a live event. When speaking with our partner organizations about shifting an event from in-person to online in some capacity, what we're consistently seeing is that a change in approach and outlook is really key to making that move a success. So re-envisioning an event for a virtual space is an opportunity for a gut check about the event's primary purpose. Is this event still the best way you can serve your mission and your community right now? For some organizations, that will mean still focusing the event on fundraising, but maybe making it a thank you to donors rather than the occasion to donate in and of itself. For others, it might mean shifting the purpose of the event more broadly. Maybe it's a festive occasion for the community to gather online free of charge, and perhaps that's a better fit for your constituents right now. Either way, think of it as a chance to really lead with your mission. Since people aren't going to be attending for the same experience as an in-person event, you can celebrate the fact that they are there simply to engage with the organization, mission, and community. I have two examples to share with you about organizations that took different paths to realizing their virtual events. 826 NYC, which is a literacy and arts education organization, has an annual spring fundraising event called Trivia Night for Cheaters. This year, they moved the event online and rebranded it as Trivia Night for Social Distancing. Teams were able to form across the country, so they were able to bring their message much more broadly than they had in the past. And people who would have all been in the same bar in New York for this event, we're now able to connect online, and it really retained its joyful, irreverent feeling. To incentivize fundraising, they were able to engage some high-profile friends of the organization, like Olivia Wilde and John Hodgman, to play on teams and read pieces written by student authors. The event was a standout in building value for the mission and reinforcing the community, and still generated meaningful revenue, even though the model and the focus had changed. If you are going to keep the focus of the event on fundraising, best practices for event fundraising still apply. And this means really, really leaning on and offering support to event leadership, whether it's the chair of the event, the honorees, an event committee, your board of trustees. Ask yourself what you can provide in terms of support and systems that will allow them to reach the broadest version of their network. In terms of fundraising, the value of events has always been twofold. They've allowed organizations to engage social circles beyond their core constituents, the friends, the colleagues, the family members that are usually one step removed from an organization. And they've provided donors with a meaningful opportunity to publicly acknowledge and celebrate their support of the organizations they give to, and create a social experience around private philanthropy. The other organization that I'm thinking of is the Authors Guild Foundation. They took a different approach to a virtual gala when their May event got canceled. They determined that the most critical piece of the event was the fundraising, which had normally provided $500,000 annually, fully a quarter of their budget. And this really comes back to the question that was asked earlier about how do you unify all those disparate campaigns that you're looking at right now. This organization decided to unify their year-end campaign, their event fundraising around their efforts they had pivoted to serve their community in a different way during this crisis. Through this one campaign, they found some effective ways to engage the event leadership, board leadership, and their membership in these efforts so that they could reach out to those extended social circles. Their board and leadership made personal appeals for gifts by phone. The two wonderful authors, Judy Bloom and Margaret Atwood, who had been slated to be honored at the gala, have been redeployed as co-chairs of this response fund, and they used social media to allow their membership to reach their social circles with this appeal. To date, they have more than replaced their gala income, having raised $900,000 and counting, and they will still hold a virtual event on the gala date, but as a thank you moment to every donor who has given $1 plus. I'm going to pause here. Yes?
I have one question about messaging during the gala, right? So a lot of times at galas, not in COVID times, we're hearing about, all of the achievements and also the future. How do we talk about that now?
And
is that the right arena for it? Yeah.
I do think that I think we're a little bit more in the moment now than we usually are. I think the most important thing that you can communicate to donors and funders is both how you're pivoting to serve your community, how you're realizing your mission even in this moment. And when we talk about the future, obviously we're forecasting in a way that no one can truly know what the future looks like right now. So I think sharing how you're thinking strategically about that future, what you're looking at, and how you're thinking about your community and what its needs are going to be in the future. I think that donors and funders really want to see that thought process. They want to see that creativity. They don't necessarily, need a set plan right now. Which actually, I'm gonna. Yeah, actually a good segue to our next one, although I'm going to take a few questions in our Q&A box before I move on. Erica Raven Scorza, do you think wealth screening services are worthwhile at this time?
Good question.
Good question. I think it depends, honestly. If you have very large lists that have never been screened, it could be really useful in this moment to try and focus target your asks or target your outreach a little bit more. I think that, the wonderful thing about wealth screening services, and we all know that there are limitations to the information they can provide us with. But the really wonderful thing about it is that you are looking at your own list, at individuals who have already self-selected as being interested in the organization. They've attended something, they've come in the front door, they have purchased something. And so better understanding who you already have in your roles, I think is a really, really critical information to have right now. And Nancy Rockman, I hope I pronounced that right, is asking, do you envision that virtual fundraisers will be as successful in the years to come? Excellent question. I do think that there is going to be a little bit of, I think people will start to feel some fatigue around virtual events or virtual interactions. But I do think that there will always be an impetus to connect, to experience the community that is built around organizations. And so I believe that there will be some new creative opportunities for people to continue to gather in some way throughout this crisis and in the future. Because I do think that it is still, there's still so much value there for community members, for donors, for board members to really connect with each other around the causes that they love. I also, I was thinking yesterday, I know a lot of organizations engage notable individuals or celebrities around events. I think that we'll start to see a little bit more engagement now while people have time on their hands. And so I wonder how these virtual events will evolve in the year to come. I am going to move on now. We had a nice transition to myth 4, which is about planning for the future. Myth 4 is that our organization can't plan for FY21 and beyond because we don't know what the future will look like. And we can't communicate to funders and donors until we have a concrete plan in place. We've been in conversation with several funders who have said specifically that they do not expect a set in stone plan in response to a situation that continues to evolve each day. In fact, some of the funders that we've spoken to have expressed that they are a little leery of a plan that appears too inflexible in the face of so many unknowns. We're going to go back to what we talked about earlier on this webinar, that what funders want to hear from organizations is 3 key pieces of information. How has this crisis affected your organization financially and operationally? How are you continuing to serve your community and realize your mission during this time? And what strategic frameworks are you using to guide your decision-making in the future? These broader points are where you want to focus your energy in communications and conversations with supporters. In many ways, this moment also offers a unique opportunity to allow donors and funders to get a behind-the-scenes look at your decision-making and provide them access to the conversations around what it'll take to get the organization open again and what the timeline for those efforts are. We all know that, there's not a future in which COVID goes away and everyone magically opens their doors. We understand the amount of work, the staff, the investment of time and money and energy that is necessary in order to realize a reopening. And this is a great opportunity to begin to have those conversations with funders and donors so that they also understand the work and time and energy and investment needed on the back end to realize the work or the experience that they care about so deeply. This understanding can also significantly deepen their relationship to the work and the organization. And while funders are not expecting to see a fully formed plan, they do want to see that you've been thoughtful about the impact of COVID-19 on your organization, both in the immediate and in the long term. So we're encouraging everyone to please be prepared with real numbers about ongoing losses, as well as forecasts for multiple budget scenarios in the future. We're usually looking for organizations for 3 budget scenarios for organizations. So a sort of worst case scenario, best case scenario, and something in the middle. And then in conversation with funders, you want to share how you're going to make those decisions, what the metrics are to make those decisions in real time in the year to come.
Yasmin, on that note, what do you think is a realistic timeline for that out planning? You know, how much can you really project into the future for those scenarios?
We are building scenarios now for 1 year and even up to 3 years. Although the 3-year financial forecasts have a lot of assumptions contained in them. But at the very least, it is absolutely possible to plan a number of realistic budget scenarios for the year to come. I think that we'll have, for most of the organizations that we are working in partnership with, we're going to have a very good sense of what contributed revenue will look like by June or July, after we've been able to complete some of those early funder conversations and maybe tested the waters with donors a little bit more. And then I think that we can build out year 2 and year 3 based on those projections for year 1. Although there's going to have to be a lot of reassessment and flexibility built in along the way over the next year. I'm going to go to a question here from Barbara Giordano. What is your advice regarding capital campaigns? Is this a time to pause? An excellent question. Thank you, Barbara. There are a number of capital campaigns that we know have been paused. I think that were paused or sort of early in this crisis. I think as with as we've seen success in some of these larger response fund campaigns or relief effort campaigns, I think that it is absolutely possible to restart capital campaigns, but I think that whatever argument was contained in your case statement, in your narrative, needs to be reassessed in light of what's going on. If you were, not to state the obvious, but if you were building a new space or establishing a new, wing of your museum, you need to really think about whether or not why that is going to be necessary, when that is going to be necessary, and make sure that your argument to donors is really firmly rooted in both the reality and also your new vision for the future. For earned, next question is from Daniel Shanahan. Hi, Daniel. For earned revenue for digital performances, do you think suggested donation or a standard entrance fee is the best approach for maximizing revenue potential? And Daniel is from Torn Space. Thank you, Daniel. I hate to fall back on the "it depends" argument, but I think that it really does depend on what your audience is used to. If they have been paying a ticket price for performances in the past, we have seen from a number of organizations that charging that ticket price and acknowledging the sort of philanthropic mission of that ticket price can be very successful. And by that I mean, instead of just referring to it as a ticket price, say, your ticket today goes to X, Y, and Z. Either we're paying our artists or we're, contributing to a recovery fund to make sure that we can come back stronger than ever. We have also seen with organizations that perhaps haven't charged ticket prices in the past, a suggested donation has been a really successful way to engage people as well. And we look at both those ticket buyers and those new sort of mini donors, because they're usually smaller donations. We're looking at those as a wonderful pool to go to in the future. And so really focusing on how to build out those relationships in the next 6 to 12 months. Next, I am going to take a question from Michelle Amador. The Culture at 3 group that has been assembling regularly is discussing how we might advocate for funding to funders. Do you have advice on how we, as an arts and cultural community, can raise broader awareness of our needs so that foundations can be responsive? The funders that I have spoken to are deeply interested and deeply concerned in what is happening to arts and cultural organizations, and they are actively seeking input, data. And so I think that from what I understand of the Culture at 3 calls, a lot of that work to gather information and share it is already being done. But as we stated earlier, I would not hesitate. So I think I believe that that's already being worked on a sort of in a broader way. And I know that funders are really looking at that data, looking at that information, thinking strategically about it. And very, very, very interested in receiving as much information as they can possibly get. On a personal level or for individual organizations, again, I would encourage you to communicate with your funders how you've been impacted, both financially and operationally. All of the funders we've spoken to have deep, deep curiosity about that, and they understand that that information will only help them better do their jobs in the future. And last question before I go on to myth 5 is from Wendy. Hi, Wendy Weinstein. My concern is more related to donor fatigue when we reopen. How do we manage fundraising, including event timing after the pause ends? Thank you so much, Wendy. That's a fantastic question. I think that if I'm understanding this question correctly, and you can chat me to let me know if I am, I think that what you're asking is, if you ask now, if you solicit your donors now, how do you go back and re-solicit them potentially in 6 months when your needs might have evolved? What I would say to that is that the best thing you can do after you receive a gift from a donor right now is engage them as a partner in solution building. If you are able to make them your partner in the work that you're doing, either to stabilize the organization for the future or invest right now in whatever version, whatever a version of reopening looks like, and really stay in close communication with them about how that evolves, you should be able to extend that conversation and make it iterative, so that in 6 months from now, you can easily go back to them because they already have an understanding of what the initial commitment was used for, what the future looks like, how you're thinking about it, and why an additional investment is necessary.
I think, Yasmin, that completely underscores what at least my experience has borne out, which is that those relationships over time are really the bedrock of successful fundraising, and that the donors really, you want to bring them on that journey with you. And that journey right now obviously has a lot of bumps in the road. But if they're invested, they're going to be on that and carrying through to the end with you.
Absolutely. And I think that what is true of what's true of every relationship is true of donor relationships. Those crisis moments, if someone is your partner in a crisis and you weather it together, that can form a very, very, very strong bond. And so again, I think that there's, crisis does present opportunities.
I just had one other thing to add, which is when you were talking about capital campaigns, I was thinking about the added expenses of reopening that many organizations are going to face. Because they're going to be, museums, for instance, and social distancing, the number of guests in their galleries, their number of probably increased staff to maintain social distancing. I mean, there's just so many more expenses, and yet less earned income as a result of at least the initial requirements, right, for reopening. So how, I guess those would also be something you want to carry forward and be explicit about, because it is going to be an increase to people's budgets, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think funders are anticipating those conversations. And I think that, again, it's a great opportunity to educate your donor and your funders about what the real costs of operating are. I think especially when you go into funder conversations, when you go into donor conversations, to have some of those mapped out, to begin to think about what those costs are going to be, so that you can lay the groundwork now for an ask that is going to come in the future. Again, I think that honest conversation, transparent conversation with donors and funders is great for relationship building and really great for fundraising. Right. But absolutely true. And Wendy Weinstein, thank you for that point, Mara. It is absolutely true that everyone is facing added expenses in the future. Thank you. Last myth is about strategic planning. That our strategic plan isn't relevant anymore. And we'll address this briefly because I know that we're closing in on the end of our 60 minutes. In truth, if your strategic plan is a strong one, we believe that it'll be relevant no matter the broader world circumstances. Your strategic plan was designed to provide clarity regarding your mission and your goals, clarity around who you serve, and provide you with a framework for decision making. And that's precisely what every organization needs right now. That being said, it is perfectly normal and appropriate that certain aspects of your plan will have to shift. Some priorities may be more feasible now, while others may have to wait or be backburnered, and the timeline for realizing certain goals may have to be lengthened significantly. In fact, it may be helpful to approach the plan from this perspective. What can we focus on achieving right now, and what can we hold on for the moment? Despite these shifts, the foundation of the plan, the articulation of your mission and your vision for the future still holds true and remains an essential tool to help you chart a course for the organization, both in the present and on the other side of this crisis. We were partnering with an arts education organization, Epic Theater, on a strategic plan that was just wrapping up as the city went into pause. And while some of the timelines for the plan are now shifting, these organizational leaders are leveraging the data and the insights that the plan articulates about their strengths and essential services to make real-time decisions during this crisis. The plan, I believe, is helping to ground them in the organization that they want to be on the other side of this, even if the path to getting there is evolving. I do want to go back to questions in the last few minutes that we have. We have a question from Erica Fee. What about talking to corporate sponsors? Many of them want bang for their buck and they are run out of marketing departments. That is absolutely true. As I think everyone on today's call knows, there are a couple of different avenues to pursue for corporate funding. There's corporate sponsorship, which are marketing dollars. There's corporate philanthropy, corporate entertainment dollars, corporate membership in some instances. And corporate sponsorship, which is what this question is about, is a marketing exchange of assets. I think that those conversations need to evolve in real time, like all of these fundraising conversations. I think that what corporate sponsors are going to be looking for is different now than it was 3 months ago, and it will be different again in 6 months and in 12 months. But working to understand what their goals are for their company and how you can partner with them to help achieve those goals, that is the first step in building a successful corporate relationship. It's not possible in this moment to just reflect back to a corporate sponsor that it's business as usual, because of course it's not. And so helping them to achieve their goals in this shifting moment is going to support a successful conversation. Hello, Karen Krasovac Lenz, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name. I ask this in light of your recent answer to ticket price and our location upstate in the capital region in a largely student and high poverty area. My board is pushing hard against staff plan for us to not charge same ticket prices for fun history museum events online as we did charge in person due to the loss of social aspect. Do you believe ticket prices can be maintained here also, or only in large metropolitan areas? I thank you, Karen, for that question. I don't think that it is, I don't think that whether or not ticket prices can be maintained is area specific. I know the capital region fairly well, having worked with organizations up there, but I do think that this question is organization specific. So if understanding your audience, understanding how their needs have changed, how their situation has changed right now, and being truly, truly responsive to that is key to making this decision. So if you're, I hear your board, if the constituency that you serve is low income, if you feel they cannot afford a ticket price right now, I would certainly not try to keep the ticket price the same. Rather, I think, again, this presents an opportunity for fundraising from other sources, because it is a tremendously strong argument to make that support is needed now to maintain these services to students. Those services in this moment are more critical than ever. I think that a lot of organizations, their mission has been thrown into even sharper relief in this time, and you can use that as a jumping off point for conversations with donors and potential funders to support and maybe replace some of that revenue. I'm going to take another question here. Marshall Weber from Brooklyn Inc. Oh wait, sorry, no, we'll come back to that in a moment, I believe. Patricia Cruz, Pat Cruz, back to my question on frequency of asks. Frequency of asks, I think that it's more about, you can ask pretty frequently during a campaign, but keep in mind that we want any sort of campaign. So sort of like looking back at what I shared about the Authors Guild campaign, you want a campaign to take place during a defined period. So best practice is anywhere from, over a 6-week period to maybe an 8-week period. I think any longer than that, and your donor base can get a bit fatigued. So what I would, for most organizations also during that 6-week period or that 8-week period, we are pushing out communication minimally once a week, but across various channels. So it's a combination of social media, some emails, personal phone calls, direct mails, letters, personal notes. And I think that as long as the narrative for that communication shifts just a little bit so that there's a sort of arc to it, and again, within that defined period with a defined end, I don't think that donors get fatigued. Lisa Ludwig, great question here. What about sponsorship money you already received for your season prior to the pandemic? If you are no longer able to produce your summer season, would you recommend going to these sponsors and asking them to keep their original investment in your organization for the future, even though you are not producing at the moment? I would absolutely recommend going to those organizations and having an honest conversation about what partnership can look like. I think that, in all of the corporate sponsorship relationships that we've built in the past, those corporations are very, very interested in being real partners, in having, again, very transparent, open, honest conversations. I think that conversation, as many of the other ones, needs to start from a point of curiosity and empathy. How is that company doing? What are they seeing? What are they experiencing? How are their needs shifting? How can you help them achieve their goals? And at the same time, share your goals for the future and why their continued commitment is so critical, and see how you can, if you, obviously your programming is not happening, but are there other ways that you can help achieve the outcomes that they were looking to achieve through this partnership?
I was thinking, Yasmin, as you were saying that this could be an opportunity for, depending on the alignment, for rather than eyeballs, which was a priority in the previous times, that this could be an opportunity for brand building for the corporation, right, to provide support at this time.
Absolutely. There are opportunities for brand building there, for being viewed as a good corporate citizen, opportunities to sort of achieve that hero status that they really like to have in a community. I also think that there are potentially opportunities, and this was true before. Corporations have always been interested in content, and a lot of arts and cultural organizations have content to give. And right now, content, as we all know, is really key, as there is as it's necessary to sustain a presence online. And so there might also be an exchange of those types of assets that can provide some value to corporate sponsors in lieu of the live events.
Great, thank you.
We are just at 11:59. We like to end on time. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. It was really a pleasure to connect with you, and hope to see many of you around the state in the year to come. I also want to thank Mara and Niska once again. This was really a pleasure, and such a wonderful experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you to your whole team at Advance NYC. Thank you to our participants. More than 400 of you have joined us today. We are heartened to have you with us. Please know that everyone at NYSCA is here to help you during these times, and that you can reach out to us with any and all suggestions. Our staff contact information can be found on our website. I want to take this opportunity also to shout out, give a big shout out to our staff for working so hard and so well apart, and as we work apart, but we're working so well together to be responsive to the field, which obviously is facing unbelievable challenges. Throughout history, the arts have and will continue to play a critical role in the health of our state. We are honored to stand today together with you. Thank you.